everyone, and very, very welcome to this climate breakfast from Viable Cities. The topic of today is how do we future-proof our cities in times of climate crisis and multiple threats? And with us today, we have 4 guests. We have Jordi Peris, who is a professor at the Polytechnic University of Valencia. And we have Henric Barkman, who is an environmental strategist at Karlstad municipality here in Sweden. We have Anna Blomqvist, who is a climate adaptation expert at SMHI, the government agency in Sweden responsible for climate adaptation issues, among other things. And then we have Rebecca Engström, researcher at KTH Royal Institute of Technology here in Stockholm, where I am, and also a part of Viable Cities team. So just a few words on the format of this. And this time we're doing it in English. Usually it's in Swedish. But this time it's in English, and it will be a part in the beginning where we have our guests and conversations with them. And after that, there will be breakout rooms in a digital format for those who are interested to join. You might leave or you might learn. It's your choice. But the first part will be available on the internet in our YouTube channel for Viable Cities. But to kick this off, I will, without further ado, give the floor to Jordi Peris Blaines, who is at the university in Valencia, but also very active in the sibling national platform CTS 2030 in Spain, which is similarly to Viable Cities, a program that is geared to accelerating the climate transition in cities, working with some 20 cities, among which Valencia is one. And Sweden, we work with 48 Swedish cities, among which Karlstad is one. Very, very welcome, Jordi. You've been a long time friend and colleague, and please give your perspective on Valencia and the Valencia Dana, as you call it, and what that triggered in your work on climate adaptation, climate mitigation, and future-proofing our cities towards the risks that they are that impact them today. Over to you, Jordi.
Thank you very much, Åsa, for the invitation, and thank you to Viable Cities for giving me the opportunity to be here, sharing with you our situation and our experience in Spain. And thank you very much for doing it in English to let me participate properly in this climate breakfast. It's not the first time that I participate in one of these gatherings, so I'm really happy of being here talking about that, and also of being in Karlstad in a couple of weeks to continue this discussion. Well, in my case, I will talk you from the perspective of one city that suffered almost 1 year ago a real catastrophe with a huge flooding produced by what we call a dana that had an impact with unprecedented impact in our territory. As you may know, we had more than 220 people that died. Around 78 municipalities that were affected, and an unprecedented impact in infrastructures, housing, public space, everything. As we have analyzed, that was not a punctual damage to our territory and our municipalities, but it was more, as we call, a systemic collapse of everything that stopped the normal living in our municipalities. In the south area of Valencia, the city of Valencia was barely affected, but it was more all the municipalities in the southern part of the metropolitan area which suffered the effects. But it affected everything. So in terms of the questions that we are discussing today, we need to think about very many different areas that need to be addressed in this post-catastrophe recovery process. The first one is hydraulic infrastructure, which needs to be updated. And somehow, after this event and the consequences of this event, there is something that is taking a huge presence in current debate, and it's regarding the role of green infrastructure. We are now aware that only with gray, with concrete, with old-fashioned hydraulic infrastructure is not enough, because these kind of events are going to occur again, and probably sooner than we expect. And we cannot face them only with traditional hydraulic infrastructure. We need to think territory with a broader perspective and incorporate big green infrastructures into the way we manage this kind of floodings. But we need to address also housing and urbanism. The way we have developed the territory is it was quite intensive in the last 30 years. So we have many houses in high-risk areas. So we need to think how to address that and how to move people that live in this area and relocate them in another less risky areas. And this is hugely complex, as you can imagine. We have an issue regarding mobility and regarding the preeminence of car as the main way of transport all around the metropolitan area, because as we clearly saw in this floodings event, was the role of the cars as a source of danger. I guess that you have seen the images of these mountains of cars in the middle of our streets that were the ones that really prevented the emergency systems to arrive to the city centers, that created additional barriers, that multiplied the impact of water. So we need to rethink our mobility system. But it also affected industry. We have had a lot of industrial parks, also social cohesion. I mean, the impact was not the same for the different social classes that we have there. We need to rethink the orchard that we have surrounding the city of Valencia, of the city, and all these municipalities as a key asset for urban resilience, because it's a huge green infrastructure that we have and that we need to preserve it and conceive it as an important asset for climate change resilience. But we need to think also about emergency protocols, the role of science and innovation, and also the governance and the institutional infrastructure that we have to address these things. Because our conclusion, our idea is that this was not a natural catastrophe. It was an extremely weather event, of course, that will repeat again sooner than we expect for sure, because all these climate change consequences. But the impact, the real impact, was created and amplified by the way we are inhabiting our territory. So in this recovery process that we are engaged now, what we are trying is to incorporate this principle that United Nations established some years ago of building back better. We do not need to build it again as it was, but we will need to rebuild in a better way. And the better way for us means a more resilient way. And for that, we need to work on a place-based approach, drawing on the municipal knowledge and their capabilities, listen to municipalities, what they know, what they are able to do, enabling city-to-city cooperation, aligning different state instruments, and base our recovery on social and innovation. And we are facing very practical problems, because we need time to rethink, to think what we need to do, what is needed in our territory. And we have a huge problem with governance and also with political controversy, with all the political controversy that has emerged around this. And just to finish now, because I don't want to extend more than the time that I was asked, I think that it's very important in this recovery process to assume that we are establishing the new urban regime for the coming years, because we have now a lot of resources. Just for talking about an example, Algemesí is a small town down in the south of Valencia. They invest around 5 million euros per year. In the coming 2 years, they will be able to invest 75 millions. 5 versus 75. So with these 75 millions, we are investing in public building, urban infrastructure, sewerage system, etc. So we are going to fix the urban regime for the coming 30 years, because we won't have all these resources again in very much time. So we are going to establish the regime, and this is both an opportunity, but it's also a threat. So we need to be really aware about that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jordi. And without further ado, I will give the word to Henric Barkman from the City of Karlstad, one of the Swedish cities that is actively working with integrating climate mitigation, climate adaptation, and including preparedness to societal crisis with the scope of wider threats. So we will hear from the ongoing work in Karlstad, and you are a core person in the climate transition team in Karlstad, who will be hosting together with us a similar conference on this similar topic in October. Over to you, Henric.
Thank you so much, Åsa, and thank you for inviting me here today. Thank you, Mr. Peris, also for giving us your story and your hard-earned lessons. And as Åsa mentioned, you're all very welcome to Karlstad in the beginning of October. We're honored to welcome Viable Cities and our dear colleagues in the Climate Neutral Cities 2030 for the next Transition Lab Forum, and which has the same focus as this climate breakfast, namely future-proofing our cities and the connections between preparedness and climate transitions. Amazing coincidence, I know. But so how do we think about these issues and what do we do in Karlstad? Well, climate change, preparedness, and security are closely interconnected. However, I think that most people, when we think about that connection, we think about the risks that the climate crisis brings about, perhaps most commonly things like floods, heat waves, and naturally we need to take measures, and we have done so. Things like raising roads leading to hospitals to secure access, constructing protection against high water levels, and so forth. And don't get me wrong, we of course need to adapt to what is not only coming, but what's actually already here. And Karlstad knows this well, being located in one of the biggest deltas in Sweden. And I really feel with Mr. Peris and his story about Valencia, and also what's going on in the moment as we speak in the northern parts of Sweden as well. However, I think my main message here today is that the climate transition is not only about cutting emissions to reduce climate risks like floods and heat waves. It is also a very strong strategy to increase overall preparedness. We have seen instances in other municipalities where some see them as conflicting goals, but they are really opportunities for synergies, I think. So let me be a little bit more specific. Let's start with energy. So Karlstad and Sweden at large has leaned into district energy, district heating, and combined heat and power, and that is a climate smart move, but it's also crisis smart because we're becoming less exposed to volatile imported fuels. And you could see that during the pandemic, where we in Karlstad, and I'm sure many of you others as well, were affected to a fairly low degree by price shocks because we have phased out 99% of oil in the energy system. And it also meant that we had more control. So we were able to switch both for our municipal owned housing company and our hospital to more district heating and less electricity for heating. So this resulted in enormous cost savings. And the next steps for us is to, well, continue, of course, expand local renewables, enable micro-production, energy communities, thermal storage, exploring hydrogen as a distributed backup that can add a new layer of flexibility, especially for reserve power where batteries simply aren't enough. So energy, but that is an example that I think that you already know about. But preparedness also sits on our plates, relates to our food, because Sweden grows plenty of grain, and we could actually manage to live on our own food production, at least in a crisis. But that would require much less meat consumption, and a lot of modern agriculture depends on imported inputs like fertilizers, fuels, and chemicals, and that is a vulnerability. So a climate-aligned pathway is to shorten the chains and thicken the web of producers, meaning more local production and processing, more small mills and craft bakeries, and not least strong links between farmers and consumers to models like Reko rings. And another thing that we've been doing in Karlstad is to increase our municipal support to smaller suppliers for them to be able to participate in procurements. Swedish mobility, bicycle actually has a crucial role for preparedness, because crisis very often means a lack of fuel or other possibilities to drive a car. So here, every bike here is sort of like a small resilience asset, I would say. Public transport plays a similar role. The next example, those who know me know I'm all about circular economy, and that is another lever we have for preparedness. So when we use, repair, share, remake, and so on, we lower emissions, but also reduce our dependency on long supply chains, and we build sort of like this circular supply resilience, which is a term that also the Swedish Civil Contingency Agency, the MSB, also has been focusing on. And again, we could go back to the pandemic, where we saw that things like electronic equipment were scarce because of broken supply chains, and that's a situation where circular processes really can help. So
thank you so much.
Yeah, okay. I need to quit.
Yes.
Can I have just 30 seconds just mentioning that we also had tried to map and align our contingency plan to our energy and the climate plan to see how they interact with each other, and that is a work that I think that all of us need to do more in the future. So yeah, some examples from us.
Yeah, thank you for those examples to make it more concrete and for highlighting the last one. Now over to Anna Blomqvist, who I'm really happy to say that we have started to collaborate with in more systematic way from Viable Cities on an international collaboration called Adaptation Hubs. But Anna, today you're going to talk about the state of the climate and your perspectives from SMHI on these topics. Over to you, Anna.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Jordi and Henric, for your inspiring talks. And good morning, everyone. My name is Anna Blomqvist, and I come from the Swedish Meteorological and Hydrological Institute, and we are an expert authority also in climatology. And I'm going to talk about three things today. And to just make myself remember what I'm talking about, I brought three things. This is the first one. And it's a stone, a red stone, and it's supposed to illustrate the state of the climate today. And as science clearly shows, we are in a climate crisis now. It affects us now, and it will affect future generations for centuries. The warming in Sweden today is +2 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial times. Sea levels have risen about 20 centimeters since the 19th century, And in the coming centuries, we can expect it to raise several meters. We have more extreme weather, like the example from Valencia. And science can now link many of these extreme weather events to climate change through something called attribution studies. But it's not only extreme weather that we have to deal with, it's also slow changes in the climate. For example, the climate zones are moving slowly to the north by approximately 1 meter per hour. So we are off track. It's a crisis now, and global emissions are still rising. We will not probably reach the Paris targets, but still every reduction in CO2 emissions matters, because it keeps everything we do still matters. Okay, so this was the first thing I wanted to talk about. The second thing is what we should keep in mind when planning for adaptation. So this stone represents that. First, as I just said, mitigation, all emissions cuts matter. And then what we really need to deal with this climate change, and I think that you, Jordi, gave a very good example of what is needed. It's a transformation of society. It's transformational adaptation that we need. We have to plan for extremes, but also for slow changes. And then we also have to think about that what happens outside Sweden or Spain or Europe, it actually affects us here through transnational pathways. It's something we call transnational climate risks. Sweden is very vulnerable to climate impacts abroad, since we import 50% of what we eat, and much of Swedish industry is heavily entangled in complicated global supply chains that can be disturbed by climate events outside Sweden. And something that Jordi also mentioned was that equity matters. Climate change can deepen inequalities, and when we do plan for adaptation, we have to address this. And the last thing about adaptation, there are some things with climate change that we will not be able to handle. There are limits to adaptation. And in the Swedish case, that can mean that coastal towns in Skåne or in the west coast maybe will have to be moved due to sea level rise. And that some ecosystems, like, for example, mountain forests, fjällnära skogar, may disappear. So it's a tough situation, and it's a tough situation to adapt to. Okay, and now I brought a third thing, and I'm sure if you are a gardener, you will recognize this. This is ground elder. Let's see the Latin name, Aegopodium pudagraria. You see the roots. If you have a garden, you know what I'm talking about. And I want this to illustrate what our next steps should be to strengthen the resilience of Swedish society. And here I really have a very short message. We have to act and implement. We have enough knowledge. We don't really, of course, we always need more knowledge and information, but we don't need more information to actually act. We have to focus on action, implementation, and building resilience now. And if you are a gardener, you know that ground elder is a perennial weed that spreads really rapidly through underground roots in several levels. And what I would like to, my message is that now we have to work like ground elder, kirskål. We have to work quick, we have to work at several levels and not give up. Okay, so that was what I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your very, very clear message. Work as ground elders. Without further ado, I will give the floor now to my colleague Rebecca Eriksdotter Engström, who will give some perspectives from her research on systemic risk research. Over to you, Rebecca.
So much. Thanks, Åsa, and thanks to all speakers. This has been so not maybe just inspiring, but scary to listen to. Fits very much into the work that I am doing with Viable Cities and from KTH. So I work with something called systemic risk, and I think we have touched on that, all of the speakers that came before me. And in a way, it's studying risk from a systems perspective, where we look at how societal risks are interconnected and influence each other. And coming into today's conversation, my current work is on how systemic risk can influence how we work with climate neutrality in cities. And here I work with the Umeå kommun in the north of Sweden, and we'll be starting up the work with the 7 Spanish mission cities in the coming year. So
you're actually in Madrid, Rebecca, now.
Yes, so that's why I'm currently in Madrid, even though it looks like I'm very much in Viable Cities colors this morning. But if I have a bad internet connection, I blame the hotel for that. So yes, the idea is that risk can be a risk focus can be a pragmatic approach to strengthen the integration between local mitigation and preparedness and adaptation. And sort of build preparedness into the climate mitigation work, whether it's preparedness to climate impacts, that we got a very stark reminder of what that is by Anna and also by Jordi, but also to other threats that can be antagonistic, supply chain disruptions for other causes or for other reasons, etc. So if we can make our climate mitigation work more risk aware, we may be better prepared for what might come. And we do know, but we also don't know what will come in the local perspective. So central to this work is acknowledging that all the decisions that we make to decrease emissions and to reach climate neutrality is sort of surrounded by deep uncertainty. And deep uncertainty is the type of uncertainty that we cannot avoid, even with better data collection, with more work, etc. It's anything that has to do when we don't know exactly how the system feedbacks, what is the cause and what is the effect. For example, a very simple example, we don't know exactly the emission reduction that we will get out of a campaign to eat less meat or to become more circular. Even though we have good calculations, we don't know what will happen in the real world when we launch that. Or on the other side, we don't know exactly, even if we have very good climate models, we don't know exactly when it will be drier and when it will be wetter in the coming 10 years, if we will have 5 more danas or no more danas, hopefully. So we have to be very agile in the way we plan our future climate neutral cities. And that's the topic of my research. And I got really, as I said, I have so much input from all of your work. I think in a sense, one can say that I try to work with Swedish and Spanish cities to build capacity and preparedness without having to experience the Dana. So we're looking at these systemic risk assessments where we do broad risk horizon scanning in a sense and see what can come, and then see what would the effect be. Try to visualize sort of the worst possible futures and then see which pathway can still get us to climate neutrality in our local context and with the decision-making power that we have. So that is sort of the work that I'm embarking on. And of course, now that I'm working with Umeå, we're doing that work, but then we're also asking how can we respond to those risks? In which sectors is it really necessary that we keep functioning even under crisis and build and invest in robustness and when we build climate neutrality, and in what sectors is it better to take a slightly more high risk approach but then be adjustable as the future kind of unfolds on us. So in a sense, this is sort of super academic and theoretical. A lot of scientists are doing computationally heavy, data demanding models on it. But in another sense, it's very pragmatic and hands-on. And I think my attempt with this work, and that I would love to discuss with all of you, is to see sort of what of all the models, what of all the tools on trying to figure out what the risk landscape is, can be useful in a municipal, in a city setting that can help decision making. And I think Jordi has already mentioned some of that. I think Henric has also started to work with some of that. So you're all on a good way, and I hope I can sort of bring something to hold it together with, a bit of a framework to make, where does circular economy, where does biking come in, where does social cohesion fit, and so on. So it's one of those massive holistic scopes, but we're trying to make it as pragmatic as we can. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. Perfect. Thank you so much, Rebecca. And I'll ask Madeleine, who is kind of helping us out with the technical things here, to bring everyone back into focus, all the speakers. And just a final word. We are slightly over time, but I think this was really, really great input for our further work on these topics, both in the Swedish context and in an international collaboration. I just wanted to mention briefly, and maybe Madeleine can share the link to the live part of the event that will take place in Karlstad in the beginning of October, on the 8th of October more specifically. But just one word or one sentence of what we need really, really to bring on when we take on really integrating these perspectives going forward in the climate transition, and really trying to create a better future for all of us. Jordi, would you like to start?
Just a sentence.
Yes.
We need to engage with transformation of our territory, and times of post-catastrophe recovery are the right times to do that.
Thank you, Jordi. Henric?
4 principles that gives us both climate mitigation and preparedness. So diversify, localize, circularity, and community. So focus on them, have this system perspective. I think it's the right path to go.
Thank you, Henric. Anna?
Yeah, difficult. I think preparedness and climate adaptation also has to do with slow and gradual changes and cuts of, for example, trade supply chains. So it's catastrophes, but it's also slow catastrophes, and we have to be prepared for that too.
Thank you, Anna. Rebecca?
And then I'll complement with that there is only one future that will actually meet us, and we need to make sure that we're not siloed in how we see the future, so that we're not viewing one future in climate neutral work and another future in climate adaptation and preparedness work.
Thank you, all of you, for this really rich and interesting conversation that we will bring forward going to Karlstad, and also in the future work that we do in Sweden and internationally. Thank you so much. And just to end off this part, I just wanted to announce that this will be on our YouTube channel soon. And also we will have a climate breakfast going forward. Thank you for today.